2022 has begun on a promising note for the automobile sector. Despite all the challenges that remain, it does seem to be promising from the point of view of the kind of year it's going to be. Now, one brand that really stood out last year was, of course, Tata Motors. Not just for its product news, but also for its business and strategic developments. And of course, there's a lot that can be expected, therefore, from Tata Motors in 22 also. It's already kicked things off by bringing us the iCNG range. It's a new range of CNG-powered vehicles that Tata has introduced. To speak about that and a whole lot more, joining me now is the person helming the passenger vehicles division at Tata Motors, Shailesh Chandra. It's great to see you, Shailesh. Welcome.
Thank you, Siddharth, and wishing you a very happy new year, and so happy to be in your show.
Wish you the same, and I am very grateful for your time. I have to start, before I even get into the CNG part of it, I have to congratulate you. We are very, very happy to have another Indian in the shortlist for the World Cup Person of the Year, and I couldn't have thought of a better person. So I'm very, very thrilled and very pleased for you.
Thank you, Siddharth. It's a very humbling experience. I think I represent a larger group who has been behind the stellar performance of PV. And of course, this is an acknowledgement for the entire team's effort. Thank you for that.
In many ways, I think the timing of this really sort of is emblematic of what's happening at Tata Motors. I mean, just 2 years ago, I know there were people who were ready to write you off completely. Today, we find that you're not just in a sort of a very exciting phase of product development and launch, but it's also a very vibrant situation when it comes to the kind of work that's happening, the R&D, and also the avenues and areas that you're getting into as a manufacturer. iCNG, it says it behind you there. That's a whole new approach towards the CNG space. It's not the first time that you've launched CNG products, but it does seem to be a new approach towards CNG.
Absolutely, Siddharth. And while we have been seeing in the last 2 years that the trend of CNG cars has been increasing, primarily on the back of 2-3 reasons. One is the rising petrol and diesel prices, where customers, and especially in the hatch and compact sedan segment, are looking for more cost-effective option from a running cost perspective. But also it has to do with the increasing availability of CNG stations in the country, which has now gone up to 3,500. And you are seeing the commitment of the government through CGD initiative that there is an intention of bringing about 800 to 1,000 stations every year. So you're also seeing those enabling factors coming into play. And also you remember that after BS6, especially in the hatch and compact sedan segment, diesel got vacated as a segment. And therefore, customers who are very sensitive about running costs, they had this option which went away from them. And that's the reason why these two segments are the hot segments as far as CNG is concerned. And that's the reason for this launch. Now, how we are differentiating our approach versus generally the other CNG variants which are available in the market. Once we did the survey in the market, there were concerns in the customers around performance of the car. It was around the safety. There have been different kind of incidences which have happened in CNG cars, and that was the other concern. And also the choices which are available as far as CNG options are concerned are more available on the lower trims with lesser features and all. So therefore, the 4 pillars on which we worked was to see how we can best keep the performance intact, how we are able to bring fail-safe features so that any remote chance of anything going wrong is taken care of through automatic actions, within the car. And of course, inherently, the car is very safe. It comes from a lineage which is a very safe car. These two cars are, one of the safest cars in their category. And thirdly, the ECUs and all which we have used are, absolutely the high-tech ones, which optimizes the performance in the best possible manner. So the technology bit is very, very state-of-the-art. And features are, features that you get. We have brought it in higher trims with more, features like automatic headlamps, rain sensing wipers, and all those kind of features, so that we are able to take the aspiration quotient of CNG vehicles, which was very low. And this is the differentiated approach as far as we are concerned.
It's interesting because you mentioned a lot of things that I planned to sort of ask you about. Now, when it comes to the CNG buyer, as I said, you used to have CNG models earlier too, but you're right, the approach was so focused on the efficiency or the running cost aspect that it was assumed that this was really a budget buyer who was happy to compromise other things too. What part of your strategy comes from this belief that the consumer is looking for an evolved product? Because making the CNG kit itself or the safety aspect of the technology just better, that's part of evolution anyway. But to bring this in a slightly more premium package, that is a first for the market. What drove you towards that?
One is that once you are giving a CNG technology, there is an immediate access to a lower running cost, which is hygiene when you bring a CNG variant. And when you connect with the customers, where the profile is changing a lot, you have young customers who are looking for performance, who are ready to pay for features, and not giving that, assuming in a very stereotypical manner that somebody who's looking for a low running cost is less, looking for aspirational features. I think that was the change in thinking. The profile of the customers is changing. 63% of the buyers are less than 35 years. And youth is ready to spend today on features. For youth, car is an object of self-expression, and they want to, just like they wear different kind of branded clothes, they want to wear cars which reflect their personality, which is more self-expressive. And keeping all this in mind, I think we wanted to just take the aspirational quotient higher and live to what our brand is now being associated with. I think these were the factors that went behind this thinking.
All right. You mentioned the safety aspect. I was with safety, which is great. And, even in today's presentation, I saw that the dual airbags, ABS are standard. When it comes to the rigidity of the structure, etc., there was talk about high strength steel. Given that the Tigor and the Tiago are already, really robust when it comes to crash safety, we've seen the ratings from Global NCAP. What part of that applies to the CNG versions? Because there is a minor modification. There is the tank, there is the new kit, but I know the rest of the structure would be similar. Can we safely assume that it scores well on crash safety?
Absolutely, it takes the same foundation as what it was for a petrol car, but there are, as you rightly said, that there are certain elements which have changed, and therefore it is in the process of undergoing the star rating part of it, which is something where we don't compromise. So this is something which we'll be able to only declare at the right time, Siddharth. But that would be the intention of maintaining the strong pillar of safety that we have embarked upon as one of the key philosophies of our products.
I'm thrilled to hear that, and I'm not surprised to hear it also. When it comes to the application itself, I know it's going to be early days when we actually see the kind of response, who's the buyer who really comes in and buys it, etc. But given that you're looking at an aspirational buyer, someone who's very upwardly mobile, at what point would you consider an automatic CNG?
We are actively thinking of it. So that first we would like to see the response of the market in the manual side and with the aspirational features that we have taken. And if there are any adjustments needed, we would do that before introducing an automatic version. But it is very clear that the penetration of automatic has been increasing, and that's a locked-in trend. It is imminent that at some point in time we would actively look towards introducing an automatic version also. But we will be able to talk about it once we have something closer to launching this kind of a product.
Sure, and I'm glad to know that you're considering it. Now, when it comes to the supply chain as well as the overall production plan, I know there are constraints when it comes to the chip shortage, so I'll talk about that later. But just the whole picture, when you take that into account, the fact that you're making the CNG option for buyers more cool, a little bit more mainstream, how does it fit into your overall strategy in terms of what sort of percentage of overall production could go towards CNG? Do you really want this to ramp up into a sizable volume?
Absolutely, and I also mentioned in the earlier press conference also that our aim would be that we penetrate to the extent of 30 to 35% of our sales of these two models, which would mean that at an overall level, we would be in the zone of 7 to 10% penetration of CNG. And that is what we would target in the foreseeable future. In near term, I would say. It will also further, it has the potential of improving because as more and more CNG stations come up in more and more districts based on the rollout of the CDG initiative of the government, I think there will be greater penetration of CNG, what we would see in our portfolio also because of that reason, because that's the main enabling factor behind the growth of CNG. I would just like to give you some data point of cities where there is availability of a lot of stations like Mumbai, Ahmedabad, or a Pune, or a Delhi. You will see penetration of models in hatches and compact sedans going up to upwards of 75%. So if there is an expansion of the stations that you see in the coming years, I would not be surprised to see a higher contribution coming from CNG models, especially in these segments.
You actually partly answered my next question about where these buyers are, but you also mentioned, that you would then actively look at maybe bringing CNG to other vehicles in the portfolio. Is it sort of fair to just assume that we're talking about cars like the Altroz or the Nexon, or could it be, potentially the larger cars too?
Yeah, each segment has very different preference. Siddharth, buyers are having very different requirement when they purchase an SUV. They are more performance oriented, and therefore there will always be a section of buyers in each segment which would look for a CNG option. But the intensity of purchase or critical mass will be more in certain segments, the ones which we have chosen as of now. But there are few more segments which we think is going to see a reasonable penetration. We have identified them and we'll start working on that. But today, if you ask me to visualize whether it cuts across all the segments today, the answer would be no. It might not make sense in certain segments, given the consumer preference and predominantly what they are looking for. So over a period of time, we'll see the response of the market, how the overall situation is evolving. We'll do more consumer research before we take any kind of an action in terms of conceptualizing our product. And then as we move forward, the CNG is going to definitely increase as an option.
That's very interesting. And Shailesh, when you say that you've already identified certain segments, I'm going to ask you which ones. So I know you may not want to tell me which ones today, but
I can't tell you about it. But imagining, Siddharth, you would be able to anticipate. But don't ask me to talk about future product plans. So I'll just refrain myself from stating anything on segments.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And I did already name the ones I thought would be the ideal candidates. Speaking of which, though, once the punch has arrived, it's also sort of once again re-emphasized the sort of change we've seen at Tata Motors. So over the last year, we find that, from being absent in people's consideration sets, you're now one of the active participants in those consideration sets across these segments where you're present with strong products. What's that one area that you think is, deserves your attention next, given where the market is?
From a product perspective, the pillars or the associations which are working for us in the market is predominantly safety and the styling, which has been super liked by the consumers, and the value system of the new consumers and new age consumers are more aligned to these two. Because I said youth is ready to pay for safety, is ready to pay for environment, is ready to pay for a car which expresses them, right, their personality. And that's the reason why we are getting the consideration. So from a product perspective, the only element which might be missing is there are certain options, which might be missing, in our range of products. Let's take, for example, an automatic in a Altroz. Maybe, certain powertrain options are missing. And we have to fill these, open gaps as far as those products are concerned. From an overall brand perspective, I think we have some distance to cover on the consumer experience. That is the transformation that we are running in the organization, to see that along with the product touchpoint experience, the other touchpoint experience is also evolved to a level where there is consistency. And that's the other area where we are focusing on. Otherwise, I think the growth and acceptance that we have seen in the last 2 years, 21 months to be more specific, we were selling on an average 11,000 cars in FY20. March 20, as we ended on March 31st, 2020, that was the average sales. And today we are selling 35,000 as of December, a 3 times jump, is showing that there are right elements in our products and the experience, and overall they trust the brand. So I think the experience is something which we have to live to so that our customers trust us more. I think that's the only area where I would say where we have taken a lot of actions, and there's always a lag in terms of how the perception changes versus the actions that you take.
Sure, and I have to say that even in both those cases, the speed at which has been happening for you over the last, I would say, about 6 quarters has been amazing. It's been great to watch and track from the outside. Now, you mentioned something like an Altroz, automatic. Sometimes, guys like me or even the consumer, we fail to also understand that there are other things at play. It's not just about the product development aspect, but it's also about supply. It's also about production cycles. Given what's been happening, globally with supply constraints, how are you positioned? Because there's been a lot of talk about the PLI scheme. There's been a lot of talk about, Tata potentially starting to maybe look at, as a group, look at manufacturing semiconductors in India. What's your position in terms of how this will play out in the short term and how you should hedge your future bets?
It's a very interesting question, Siddharth, because you asked 10 people and none of them would have an answer to this, given the uncertainty that we see in the semiconductor industry. And this is not a problem which is going to go away soon. That is, what to say, a consensus view across the industry. And given that as you're adding more new technology feature with the advent of ACEs, it's only going to aggravate, right? And capacities don't get created overnight. There are certain actions that OEMs have to think of, right? So for example, we just can't be waiting and hoping that the capacities will increase and we'll start getting all the semiconductors that we wanted. And therefore, we have been working on different fronts. First, trying to see whether we can look for certain alternative chips. We have been also buying from the open market, which we continue to do as and when it is available. But more importantly, seeing if we can optimize the number of chips that we use in different components. Because if you are able to optimize them, then I think there's a way out in terms of further decoupling yourself with this uncertainty. And these are the innovations that all the global companies will try in the auto industry. We have been able to do much faster, I would say, with the agility of having co-located teams and immense energy and passion inside the company to take these kind of challenges head on. And that's the reason, I would say, one of the reasons, Siddharth, why we have been able to slightly do better than the industry as far as handling the semiconductor crisis is concerned. And going forward, therefore, we are focusing on certain mitigation actions so that we are able to best decouple ourselves. We cannot completely decouple, but to what extent we reduce at being at the mercy of the semiconductor situation. And that would be the whole effort. But I must say that this is a problem that we have to live with. It is definitely improving. In the last 2 quarters, the industry only was able to do 750,000 in a quarter. And just as a reference, Q4 of last financial year would have been more than 900,000. So every quarter, the industry is losing because demand remains strong. There's huge pending booking in the industry. But in Q4, we have seen improvement based on the indications that we have got from the tier 1 suppliers of certain critical components. And you can imagine a 10% improvement or so. But still the demand and supply, there's a gap which remains.
So just to put this topic behind us.
You also talked about the entry into semiconductor production. I think that is a group level topic which I would have less insights so therefore I would not even be able to comment on that.
That's fair. No, but I mean, it will be exciting, of course, to see what the outcome of that study is. Now, all of these things, of course, leads us to all the excitement that you've also created on the EV side. I think and I have to say that that's part of the reason, one of the many reasons why you're also in that shortlist for the World Car Person award. Now, with EVs, your approach has been a little bit different than what we've seen with most other car makers, where it's not been tokenism, it's not been a flagship, it's also not been a niche, inaccessible product. You've really gone to the heart of the market there, and you've promised that there will be a lot of action to come. How constrained are those future plans when it comes to all of these constraints on supply?
Yes, so I think that will remain one of the biggest challenge that, but you can imagine, Siddharth, that we have been for quite some time proactively working with the suppliers, not only in terms of giving them visibility of what the demand could be, and therefore proactively planning for supplying them. If needed, we are creating alternatives, driving localization at a faster pace, and just to give a flavor of how that has impacted us, go 6 months back, we were producing and able to supply only 600 electric vehicles a month. And you would have seen within these 6 months, we have taken it up to nearly 4 times more, 2,300 or so. And therefore, that is yielding result. We have a better outlook going forward. We have definitely taken certain commitments on the future products that we are going to launch. If required, we are trying to see if we can work with more suppliers so that we are able to hedge the risks on the supply side. But it is true, Siddharth, that in the new technology area, when it is going through the steeper part of the S curve, there will always be the supply side which will lag the demand. And we are trying to best offset the losses which might come because of that. So it is all about proactive planning and working with suppliers and creating alternatives that we are working with. And some of the initial results are there to see. So as we launch these 10 products, what we have said, we will ensure that before launch, we also create certain inventories so that we don't launch and kind of not provide cars in the market. So those kind of launch planning will also have to be done properly. And once we feel comfortable on the supply side, that will be the sequence of launch. It will remain a stress, not only for us, globally it will be, because simultaneously all the global markets will move together towards electrification because of different pressures. Europe will be moving very fast because of the emission norms, and every geography will have one reason or the other.
Shailesh, this whole point about first making sure that you're going to be ready for the supply side of it because the demand will be there. How much have your projections changed from the time you brought the Tigor EV to market and the time you bring your next EV to market? Because we're already seeing the change. I mean, we can feel it on the ground, and certainly the numbers and the bookings show it too.
Yes, so Siddharth, especially I would talk about Nexon EV because that was the first personal segment product that we had launched. We would have imagined 1/3 of the demand that we are getting, right? We had imagined a much slower ramp up, but two things have happened which has changed this trajectory. One is that one good thing about early adopters is that they are very expressive, right? They are with very high conviction, but when they are satisfied, they talk openly about it. And you will see in YouTubes and all, the Nexon EV buyers are posting their experience on the YouTube.
Yes.
And that is really encouraging the fence sitters to move towards EVs because they were waiting for that confirmation from the early adopters that it works well, there is no issue, it meets, it's very practical. And basis that, you have started seeing a natural pull coming because of that reason. The second big factor has been this whole comfort that home charging is a very practical solution for daily use.
Yeah.
And this whole worry around public charging is too much an overstated issue. And that comfort is also coming. And also in the meanwhile, there are, public charging infrastructure also, which is being accelerated. Tata Power has already installed 1,000, but we have shifted the focus of those public charger more on the highways rather than within the cities. Third big factor has been the
Yeah.
progressive policies by the states, because remember that FAME incentive was only limited to fleet segment. It was not an incentive available to personal segment. But once it was available in states like Maharashtra and Gujarat, you have seen a very steep surge. Now, these are the factors which were unknown to us, and therefore our estimation of demand was slightly lower than what has eventually come. But the best thing is that that's the beauty of the first phase of conversion products, that you can ramp up your production very fast because it can be made in the same assembly line. And therefore, we have been able to ramp up. Yes, there are certain powertrain parts where we had to ramp up the supplies, and that's an ongoing work. So that's how the situation is. So, in gist, we had underestimated, what the demand could have
Yeah.
been. Yeah.
No, so certainly seen that. So one last point then, there's been a lot of anticipation around the Altroz EV because of course it's a car that you've shown at global motor shows as well. That and the first born electric EV. When can we expect both these?
It's in the sequence of the 10 products. I cannot reveal that sequence. Altroz EV is something which we had shown in the Geneva Motor Show, if you remember. And there was a certain concept that we wanted to drive, but over a period of time, we realized that that concept needs to be slightly different, and that's the reason for delay. Otherwise, you remember we had said within 2 years we are going to bring that
Yeah.
product. But a lot of things have changed, and the expectation, our understanding of the expectation of customer has also changed. So Altroz EV is a commitment to the market, and we'll bring it at the right time, but not something which I can share at this stage, when it is going to come. And in our journey of these 10 products, we are targeting skateboard products also. And you can imagine that these will be in the initial stages of concept. And anything to say at, very firmly at this stage will be difficult. But we are looking at options which are more progressive as we move forward. The car should get enabled in this journey towards ability to house more energy in the car so that it can go longer ranges, and this will be progressive starting from medium range products like Nexon, and then it'll go higher.
All right, so I'm going to squeeze one more in here, and that is when it comes to iCNG and EV, what sort of future development or strategy does export take into account?
Sorry, repeat your question. Export.
For iCNG and EVs, yeah, do you see an export potential?
For EVs, we see this as a big opportunity actually, because you remember those days where the emission norms used to be different in different parts of the world, especially when you talk about the big markets. They were one or two, emission levels higher than you, and also on the safety side. And you're seeing that over a period of time, while there has been harmonization, but still there is, in the ICE world, there is a gap of emission norms, right? Still which exist. But EV therefore just removes that constraint. And the second factor that I see is that most of the EVs, if you see globally, start at the price point of $25,000, etc. And therefore, we have our prices would be more competitive versus that, and therefore these are very state-of-the-art products. These are not cheap technology product. Any technology that we are giving is absolutely state-of-the-art. These are very promising product, and therefore I clearly see an opportunity going forward as far as international business is concerned. But we are dealing with first serving the Indian market, and therefore we'll have to time it properly. But there are certain countries which are promoting EVs in a certain manner, and we would target them better first. And frankly, if you ask me today whether I have frozen on the markets which I would like to enter, it's work in progress. And therefore, I will be able to talk about it at the right time. But the aspiration will definitely be international as far as EV is concerned. I would not have actively thought about CNG as an option because we'll have to do more innovation before it can go globally. So I'll just park that response as of now.
No, but I can tell you that on EV especially, countries in Southern Europe, of course, countries like South Africa, where you've traditionally been strong, we get a lot of those questions as well, saying, why aren't they bringing these cars here? So that I'm sure is something that you also get. But Shailesh, it's exciting times, and you know what? It makes us very happy and proud to see all of this happening here in the country. Once again, many congratulations to you, and of course to the whole team on what's happening with iCNG and everything else.
Thank you, Siddharth. Such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Likewise. No, I appreciate your time, and yeah, all the best. Can't wait to drive the iCNG Tiago and Tigor.
Sure. Thank you. Take care.